Welcome to this episode of the Think Wildlife podcast. Today we talk about the conservation of a very special species of wildcat. This is the clouded leopard. Currently, clouded leopards are found across Southeast Asia and Northeast India. Our guest for today's episode is Chrishen Gomez, who is a PhD student at the Wildlife Conservation Research Unit in the University of Oxford. Today we talk about his PhD work, the population genetics of clouded leopards, various threats faced by species and what is being done to conserve the species. We also talk about Wild Crew's Clouded Leopard program and all the great work they're doing to conserve this very rare species. Tune in to listen more and don't forget to subscribe and share to this episode. Welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on today to talk about clouded leopards.
Yeah, thank you, Anish. Thank you for inviting me.
What got you interested in studying clouded leopards?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you might be surprised to learn that I actually didn't know much or anything at all about the clouded leopard other than the fact that it existed before studying it. Because my route research was always through the lens of conservation. I knew biodiversity conservation was one of three existential harms that humanity faced. And I thought biodiversity was something I could work on. And so in Malaysia, there aren't many research projects dealing with biodiversity. And one of the, I think, seminal, long-standable projects was this project that was monitoring clouded leopards and trying to study them. Because of course, in the process of studying clouded leopards, you study a whole host of other animals as well, and you end up studying ecosystems as a whole. So I think cloud leopards became it wasn't my intention, but it became actually a really good model organism for biodiversity.
So how did you end up at Wild Crew to your PhD?
Yeah. I was really fortunate. When I wanted to begin this career, and I scanned the horizons and I scanned the jobs that were available in my sphere in Malaysia. Wild Crew was running a project studying clouded leopards in then Borneo, in Sabah, north of Borneo. And there was this guy named Andrew Hearn who had just completed his PhD at that point and was looking for a field manager to sort of run operations in the field locally whenever he was away in the UK. And I went for an interview, he hired me, and I became a field manager. And so for about 2-3 years, my job was entirely focused around managing a grid of camera traps, deploying radio collars, GPS collars on cloud leopards, managing research assistants, hiring research assistants, dealing with government authorities and local partners and collaborators. And it's through that process of working with him that we realized that a DPhil or a PhD would be a good idea to keep the project going, keep it long term. And yeah, we developed a project together and applied for funding together.
So how did you go about getting funding for this PhD?
Yeah, that was a real uphill climb. I remember lots of sleepless nights thinking about how I'm going to pay for this whole thing, because everyone will know that a PhD in the UK is expensive. Nothing comes free. So it took about 2 years of banging my head against the wall, trying to speak to various NGOs, corporates, government, scholarships. I tried everything really, and failed for all of 1 year. Decided to take a break for a bit and try again next year, but just take a step back, and then reevaluated the strategy. But what it ended up being was we wrote to a Malaysian company that had supported our work before, a foundation that had a foundation, and they decided to. We wrote to them about the fact that I had already secured a place in Oxford and was just looking for someone to pay for it, and it was going to be about cloud leopards, and this company happened to like and love clouded leopards and had funded work on cloud leopards before, so yeah, they funded it. But it was really right place, right time, the right company, the right people within the company. So yeah, I couldn't give you a formula, unfortunately, other than try very hard.
Coming back to clouded leopard, how many species of clouded leopards are there in the world and how are they different?
So there are currently, as of 2007, 2 species of clouded leopard. There used to be, for the longest time, just one. And the two species are geographically divided, so they do not overlap. The mainland clouded leopard is in all parts of Southeast Asia, right up to south of China. So it kind of stops at the Himalayas. That's sort of the northern reach of the clouded leopard's range. And the Sunda clouded leopard, which is the second species. Now, the name, the Sunda, comes from this prehistoric geographical landmass called the Sunda land. And it stems from this period when there was a landmass that combined Borneo, Sumatra, Java, all of these islands together, right? And the Sunda cloud leopard, therefore, is this cloud leopard that just roams these territories. So their biggest range, I'd say, is in Borneo, which is just east of Peninsular Malaysia. And then there's a small pockets of them in Sumatra as well. Yeah.
How are both species of clouded leopards faring currently in terms of their conservation?
Yeah, both are vulnerable by the IUCN, and the threats are different. So for the Sunda cloud leopard that's distributed in Borneo, the major threat is habitat fragmentation. So if you look at the map, you'll see that there are lots of big patches of forest in Borneo. By big, I mean it on a relative scale, because for a clouded leopard, they're actually quite small. And because the patches are not large enough, often the patches are not large enough to sustain a population of cloud leopards with itself. And because the populations become quite small within these forest patches and they're disconnected from other forest patches, you get patterns that geneticists would call the inbreeding effects or the inbreeding depression. And that basically happens when related individuals start mating with each other. And we've seen this time and time again with many, many cats all over the world. Whenever habitats become fragmented, they start inbreeding. And then you start seeing genetic diseases pop up. So that's quite a dangerous thing for clouded leopards. But in the mainland, it's different. In the mainland, you have an extreme pressure, it appears, from what we think is poaching pressure. So hunters coming in from Vietnam, Cambodia, up north, and Thailand, coming through the jungle. And this is real, like, big commercial enterprise, because they sell these poached animals all the way in Southeast Asia, all the way right through China and India. So it's a big illegal market. There's a lot of money involved in it, and where there is lots of money, there's lots of incentive for people to do it. So the mainland cloud leopard is exposed to those kinds of more sinister direct threats, I would say.
Could you introduce us to the Clouded Leopard program and how it came into being? What is the project currently focusing on?
Yeah. So our organization is called the Bornean Carnivore Program. So we focus on science of carnivores in Borneo. There's lots of things to study about carnivores. Carnivores are an essential part of every ecosystem because they exert this top-down pressure. Top-down pressure means they are at the top of the food chain and they regulate things under it. And you'll see ripples of the top-down pressure all the way down to the very bottom of that food chain in the plant diversity. And many studies have shown that once you remove apex predators or predators in general from a landscape, you get a homogeneity of plants. So you stop seeing diversity of plants because the herbivores start exploding and the herbivores select particular types of plants and they eat all of that and decimates it. And so predators are a really important part of this balancing equation. So that's why we study carnivores in general. But clouded leopards, of course, are in Borneo the apex predator. And so they then become a really good proxy, a really good symbol for biodiversity in a region. And so just by studying clouded leopards, we're not just understanding what this cat needs, we're understanding what anything that depends on a forest needs. And that is super, super important. Because forest systems are unique, they're precious, especially in Borneo. They hold species that we don't have anywhere else. And having a good easy measure for how intact the forest is really important. And clouded leopards seem to be that. Where there are clouded leopards, there's also hundreds of other mammalian species. And then the mammalian species are, of course, representative of thousands of plant diversity and insect diversity. So yeah, that's basically what we do.
One paper I found which the wild crew was involved with was how the population densities of the Sunda Clouded Leopards varied with different anthropogenic activities and pressures. So, could you elaborate upon the study a bit?
Yeah. So anthropogenic pressure in that paper was measured by looking at road access and if any shotgun shells were found in that place, right? Because it's very difficult to quantify how much anthropogenic pressure a place is experiencing. So that's how that paper modeled it, which is probably the best attempt at the time. And of course, unsurprisingly, you found that anthropogenic pressure was positively correlated with negative presence of cloud leopard. So there's of course, very famous adage, which is correlation is not causation. So that's all we can say about it. We're saying that where we're finding strong anthropogenic pressure, we're finding less clouded leopards. Take for that what you may, but of course, the natural conclusion is that humans have some effect. And the effect is likely landscape of fear, LOF. That's a very well described ecological phenomenon where humans are driving animals to be fearful of them, and that's causing them to flee a landscape wherever humans are. Yeah, and I'm anecdotally, I think just after immersing in that environment, I know that not very many people would be discerning about which animal they killed if they were out on a hunt at night. And there's very little law enforcement. So, yeah, just anecdotally, my gut feeling tells me that, yeah, of course, anywhere that has higher poaching levels are going to be more risky for clouded leopards.
Another study utilized multi-scale habitat selection to predict the threats and conservation opportunities for a species. So, what
Yeah,
exactly is multi-scale habitat selection modeling, and
yeah.
how was it used for the study?
Yeah, I mean, this goes into quite a bit of technicality, but I'll try and simplify. When you're trying to think about how animals select a variable, and let's not use the word variable for simplicity's sake, but let's say when you're trying to think about how animals choose where to move, it is making decisions about that place. As it's walking, it's going to look around, it's going to see, okay, the canopy is closed. I quite like that. It means that I'm quite hidden. It means that there's not a lot of light coming through. It's not very bright. It's kind of dim and dark, and that's good for me. And so cloud leopards will tend to choose places that have a closed canopy. So think about closed canopy as a variable, right? Of course, a cloud leopard is going to choose maybe 100 variables at a time of how to select where to move, right? And closed canopy is just one of that 100 that is being considered. But the cloud leopard is not going to choose every variable at the same scale. Now, what this means is maybe when the cloud leopard is moving, it may select closed canopy at a much broader scale than we think. Because, say there's a small gap in the forest canopy for about 1 meter, right? And on the satellite, we can pick up, there's this 1 meter gap here where there's no closed canopy. Is that 1 meter going to affect the cloud leopard movement? Is that open space, that gap in the canopy, going to deter the cloud leopard? So that would mean that on a 1 meter scale, cloud leopards are selecting for closed canopy. And we can run models to test it at 1 meter scale, and it probably will tell us no, they don't actually care. If there's a gap of 1 meter, it's going to treat it like a closed canopy anyway. But what if that gap was now, say, 100 meters? What if someone had cut down the trees for 100 meters and now there's an open canopy? And we saw that at the scale of 100 meters, when we looked at closed canopy, the closed canopy variable at a 100-meter resolution, we saw, okay, yeah, cloud leopards are sort of avoiding this landscape. At 100 meters, they don't like it anymore. And they start choosing other things. They start avoiding it. They start avoiding that. So every variable interacts with the animal at particular scales. So when we use multi-scale approaches, what we mean is we're going to optimize each variable for the scale at which it will affect the animal. and then model that whole relationship as a collective. So we're saying that not all variables affect every animal the same way and at the same scale, and it's optimizing that scale. I hope that makes sense.
So, what were the findings from the study?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe non-intuitively, um, well, I'll tell you the interesting result, because unsurprisingly, that study revealed that cloud leopards loved really good intact forest. They stayed away from highly human-dominated areas like palm oil and timber plantation and housing development and urban development. But surprisingly, we found that there's a whole classification of secondary forest or regrowth forest or reduced impact logging forest. Those places actually did support very good densities of cloud leopards. And so we found that there was a very strong correlation between cloud leopard presence and density with those types of forest patches as well, which is maybe unsurprising to some, but to the conservationists, it's good hope. It's a good sign that even if there is a slight human impact on the forest, but the forest is largely intact, even it has been logged terribly 30 years ago, but that it's been given a chance to regrow, animals will start using the landscape again, and that's really good news.
So, talk a bit about the work you are doing for your PhD on clouded leopards.
Yes, so all of the models that we built have been based on a particular type of data, and that data is movement data that you obtain by putting a GPS collar on a cloud leopard and just watching it move. Okay, and that's very, very good. It's excellent data. The only problem is if you do not get dispersers collared, then you'll have animals just sort of tinkering around and ping-ponging in their own home range, in their core habitat, which is good. So now we know, well, this is what we absolutely know a cloud leopard needs for core habitat. But if you're trying to model habitats that are needed for long-scale connectivity and movement, you want to find animals that are going to be dispersing. So you've got to put collars on animals that are going to be moving from one great habitat to another great habitat, but it's going to pass through some very, very dodgy habitat in the middle. And the challenge will be finding those types of individuals, and often we don't, right? So there's a bit of a long pretext, but the work in my PhD is to try and use genetics to try and validate the models we've built from the movement data. So the idea here is if two populations are connected and there has been dispersal happening in every generation, you should see quite a lot of genetic diversity and gene flow between those two areas. But if they are not connected, then you'll see something called population differentiation or genetic differentiation, where enough of a genetic signature starts developing for each population that they separate. And you can test this genetically. So that's my PhD.
Do you have any preliminary data available? How was your PhD progress so far?
Yeah, it's coming along well. I say we've had to use some very sophisticated genomic tools to try and answer the questions we want to, because genomes offer really high resolutions into an individual's genomic history. And because of how rare it is to find a clouded leopard, we don't have very many populations or individuals. And so every genome makes a huge difference and is really important, which is why we've chosen to work with the whole genome. So it's required a big amount of data processing and learning lots of new skills on how to handle genomic data and working with bioinformatics. But I think we're finding on a preliminary scale that as a whole, because of the island effect, you find very low amounts of standing genetic diversity as compared to what would have been on a free-ranging mainland or continental animal. And so comparing the mainland and Sunda, the Sunda has much less genetic diversity, much more inbred, much more homozygous, genetics we call it. And so because of that, much more prone to inbreeding actually. And that's quite worrying. But that's got nothing to do with the landscape effect. That's just because of the fact that it's from an island population. It might also indicate that there was a huge population crash many thousands of years ago, and that might have reduced the gene pool available on the island significantly.
So, what is being done to conserve the clouded leopard?
Yeah, at the moment, a lot of our work involves working with policymakers on landscape prioritization. So when we develop a model that predicts where corridors are, our task then is to speak to a policymaker or land use planner and say, here are the corridors that are really important for biodiversity. You need to, one, protect them, and if they're not protected, or if they are deforested, we need to reforest them. So yeah, that is the main thing that's going to make a difference for wild, free-ranging clouded leopards. Because at the moment in Borneo, we don't have evidence that they're being poached. We don't have evidence of a robust or active trade network. And so, yeah, I think landscape integrity is going to be the main focus, and it's what we do.
So, what have been some of the most prominent challenges you have faced in your conservation career so far?
Getting this deal off the ground was very difficult. Trying to do research and impact policies is difficult because on the one hand, you need to be scholarly, and scholarly means novel, original. There's a level of sophistication that is appreciated, but often what you need for impact is not any of that. Sometimes you just need to apply the tried and tested method, the boring old method, on a population to prove something that science already knows. And it's all about packaging this new information or this old information in a new way that is more accessible to policymakers. And so that sometimes doesn't make for very good academics, but that is what conservation is. So I would say there's a lot of overlap between research and conservation, but there are oftentimes it doesn't overlap. And as a conservation researcher or scientist, we work in that overlap, and that overlap can become very, very narrow and inaccessible sometimes.
So, what have been some of the most prominent learnings from your conservation career so far?
Just from a personal level, I guess, it's to become used to things not working out, changing plans, plans not going according to what you would expect. It's becoming used to the fact that it's difficult and most likely you're going to fail at what you initially set out to do, but that's all right. That's part of the game. And if you don't push on and just keep going, the easier the status quo is to just do nothing. And I think that's not acceptable anymore. So I think that was my big learning, just becoming used to failure and not beating yourself too much up when things don't work out.
So, how can individuals contribute to conservation of the clouded leopard?
I think awareness is really important. I mean, at the end of the day, the government's going to respond. The government's going to respond to pressure from people. If people really care about an animal and they genuinely was afraid existentially that animals such as this was going to disappear or was threatened, then government will act more swiftly and with more certainty, right? So unfortunately, we live in a democracy, and you've got to hold politicians up accountable by the power of your vote. And if we demand from politicians that unless they have a very effective landscape planning policy in their campaign speeches, then they won't include it. And if they don't include it, it's not going to be on high up in their agenda. Yeah.
So, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure learning about clouded leopards and the work you're doing.
No, my pleasure, man. Thank you so much for giving us a space to talk about this wonderful animal. I love your work as well. I think podcasts like this is exactly what conservation needs. So thank you for filling that space up.